Yo, it's JP. Let's talk today about stalkers at work and problematic customers. Okay? So, in most of the cases that we pursue, which are discrimination, retaliation, sexual harassment, sexual assault, etc., in most of the cases in this arena, the case involves a bad actor who also works for the company. So it might be a coworker, a colleague, a boss, a manager, a supervisor, right? But the bad actor is typically another person who is employed by the company. That's not the only foundation for possible claims. We actually see a fair amount of claims that involve a bad actor who is a customer, client, or patron of the establishment. Where do we see these cases? Well, most of these cases emerge from either one of two industries. One is retail, okay? And the other is hospitality. So by retail, I'm talking about, department store, clothing store, Home Depot, right? Menards, Target, whatever, right? I'm talking about I'm sorry, Target. I don't see a lot of cases out of Target, quite frankly. In my experience, I think Target seems to be pretty well run because I see I see a lot of cases out of Walmart, okay? But I don't see a lot of cases out of Target. But that's what I mean by retail, right? Retail, any big retail establishment, that's where you see these cases. And then hospitality, bars, restaurants, that general direction. These are the two big arenas where you see problematic customer cases. Sometimes these cases involve behavior that can outright be classified as stalking. And that's a very serious situation. I think this is a type of situation that happens far more often than people recognize. And I think there are probably lots of folks who find themselves in a situation where they work at an establishment, whether it's retail, whether it's a bar, restaurant, or what have you, and there is a customer, client, patron who is bothering them. And in fact, sometimes it goes beyond bothering, okay? Well, we've had cases where primarily these cases involve women who are being the target of stalking or harassment, but I've also had a couple cases involving men. And so in some of these cases, just to give you a sample fact pattern, you have an employee who works in a retail store, right? Let's say they work in some kind of home goods store, okay? And there is a customer, and this employee, this woman, she helps the customer with a particular issue or problem one day, something they were looking for, and the customer is kind of overly friendly and familiar, but she just brushes it off and keeps it moving, doesn't think anything of it until the next day the customer shows back up and he's like, well, hey, sweetheart, you were so helpful with this thing yesterday, and you're so darn pretty, and I figured I would just come back and see if maybe you could help me again, right? Like at that point, okay, look, I'm sorry, it ain't the fucking strip club, y'all. It ain't the fucking strip club. Take it to the strip club, okay? Take it to the strip club. Don't be in there bothering, right, the attractive younger sales associate, barista, whatever, and going back the next day and being like, oh, you're so darn pretty and this and that, trying to get her number. Dude, seriously, take it to the fucking strip club. Take it out in the streets. Don't do that to a person at their job. But people do that. And then it happens, right? Then it happens again. Another 2 or 3 days later, it happens again. The guy comes back. He, he's walking around the store, kind of loitering, looking for her, right? Literally just hanging out in the store. You can watch the camera. I've done these cases where it's like, watch camera, okay? Guy's in there, 40 minutes, walking around. Even some instances, the guy goes up to somebody and says, hey, do you know when Jenna's working? Is Jenna in today, right? Which, that should be a red flag okay? But it's not, because these companies don't, right? These companies have billions of dollars, but they don't have like the appropriate protections in place to deal with situations like this, because they largely don't care about situations like this. And the guy keeps coming back. He, sometimes you watch the camera footage. He waits in the store for 40, 45 minutes for Jenna to show up for her shift. And then he basically puts the full court press on her, and he's flirting with her and giving her number, this and that. And then Jenna goes and tells her manager what's happening, and that this creeps her out, and she feels really uncomfortable. She's kind of nervous about this guy. He's come back several times. And then the manager tells Jenna, he's just flirting with you. He's just flirting with you. The customer's always right. It's part of our job is to be friendly and treat the customers the way they want to be treated and give them what they want. And so you just got to go along with it and be flirtatious and be friendly and everything else, because that's good for our business. Okay. Well, here's a problem with that. Okay. Here's a problem with that. In some instances, people like this particular creeper will stop there. Okay. In some instances, those folks will stop right there. Okay. They'll go to the store. They'll bother the person for a couple days. It'll be a flavor of the week. They'll take interest in somebody else somewhere else. Right. And it'll just gradually like fall away and not be an issue. Right. Yeah, sure. That happens sometimes. But you know what else happens? Okay. Some of these people, they're just not all there. They're not lucid. They're not stable. They're not on solid foundation. And what happens with people like that? Like, I'm sorry to be such a motherfucker, but like, you gotta, right? The reason why the world has devolved into this situation, this massive clusterfuck of habitual bright line oversteppers, right, is because people do shit and cross the line and there's no fucking consequences. Okay. And so in situations like this, you go back to the situation with our hypothetical Jenna. Okay. Like, Jenna's manager should have immediately, as soon as Jenna raises the concern and says, this guy was in here once, he came in here 2 more times, he's calling me sweetie, he's hitting on me, asking for my number, it makes me really uncomfortable. Like, as soon as that happened, like, Jenna's manager should have immediately gotten involved. Like, if I'm the manager of that store, okay, like, this hombre is going to come in the next day, be posted up and be waiting for Jenna. I'm going to go out to this cat. I'm going to be like, excuse me, sir, okay? It has come to my attention that you have come to this store intentionally to seek out, follow, and have encounters and interactions with my colleague Jenna. And you've called her sweetie and you've asked for a number and you've attempted to flirt with her. Number one, that makes her really uncomfortable. And number two, that's never going to happen again because you're banned from the store. Okay? And if you have a problem with that, you can take it up with management. And if anybody's scared or worried about, a customer might go blow us up, like, yeah, go ahead and put me on blast and I'll put you back on blast and say this guy was a damn stalker. What do you want to do? Get out of here, I'll call the police. Right? Get out of here, I'll call police. That's what I would have done. They didn't even have to do anything quite so drastic. They didn't have to be, right, the ultimate buck hombre. They just could have been like, sir, this is inappropriate. You're making her uncomfortable. You want to come back? You want to be a patron of this store? You want to shop here? You stop that immediately. This is your warning, right? It happens again. That's it. 0 tolerance. You're out, right? They could have handled it any number of ways, but they didn't. They told Jenna, this guy's just being friendly and flirtatious, and it's good for our business if you're, friendly and flirtatious right back. Well, this is from a real case file. So where'd it go from there, right? The guy kept coming back to the store. And oftentimes, he wouldn't buy anything. He would just come in, he would look for Jenna, he would wait for Jenna, he would loiter, and then he started waiting for her to get off of her shift. And followed her to her car, right? To basically hit on her, proposition her, confess her undying love, okay? And like, she is completely petrified, okay? And so now she calls her boyfriend, and now her boyfriend, right, is like literally coming to the store if she gets off her shift in the evening time when it's dark to make sure that she can get into her car and not be stalked, accosted, assaulted by somebody like this. Because the problem, back to the bright line, right? Back to the habitual line steppers. If you let people habitually step across the line, especially if they are people who are not all there. They've got screws loose, okay? If you let those people habitually cross the line, they're going to keep going. They're going to keep going, right? Every time you give them an inch, they're going to keep coming. They're going to keep coming. They're going to keep coming. And now, right, rather than asserting the reasonable parameters, right, rather than saying, these are the rules of the road, bucko, you can't do this, bright line violation, here's your consequences. Rather than doing it that way, you're just giving and giving and giving and giving. And that's when these people do something crazy. That's when these people do something crazy. And so from a standpoint of protecting, right, the rights of people involved and society and everything, right, you need to shut that kind of nonsense down. But there are so many companies in retail and in hospitality who don't shut it down. They let it continue progressing. And unfortunately, in some instances, just because of numbers, statistics, probabilities, eventually you let that stuff persist for long enough, you're going to have a situation where something really, right? You had Jenna being like accosted at her car and the guy like, trying to get with her and like trying to make out with her. Why? The guy's got screws loose. He's been coming to the store, stalking her in broad daylight, and it's been okay and he's gotten away with it, right? So now she's got claims against the company. She's got massive claims against the company. Okay. People say, how does that work? How's that possible? It's not an employee of the company. No. The company's liability there is not based on whether or not somebody's an employee, right? Jenna's an employee. By virtue of Jenna being an employee of the company owes her a certain duty of care. The company has to take reasonable steps and reasonable measures to protect her against known dangers, right? And if you know for a fact, if you're a big company retail chain and the manager knows that this guy who's clearly got some screws loose because he comes to the store and basically waits around for Jenna and stalks her and tries to flirt with her and doesn't buy anything, like, the company knows that guy is a potential threat or risk to Jenna. They especially know when he shows up and starts waiting in the parking lot for her. And the fact that they don't do anything, that is what opens the door to and ultimately subjects them to massive liability under a theory of negligent, well, it's basically just a theory of negligence, right? Because the thing is, negligent retention and supervision are for when one employee or one colleague assaults another, et cetera, et cetera. But here, this is under a theory of negligence. This is just straight negligence, right? Here's the right duty, breach, causation, damages. You knew that this guy was a risk. So this parallels, right? This is why I almost got it twisted up there. This parallels like negligent retention, negligent supervision, right? Like if you have an employee who you know is a danger or a threat to other employees and say one employee is sexually harassing or sexually assaulting colleagues and the company knows about it, that's negligent retention, negligent supervision, right? This, where it's a customer, a patron, a member of the public, that is just outright negligence. Some people would even run that as premises liability, They would even run it as premises liability. They'd even be like, yo, you got this stalker coming to the store and you didn't secure the premises. This was reasonably foreseeable, okay? But that's negligence. I'll tell you where else you see this, right? That's the retail context. I've seen several of those. I see it in the hospitality industry, and those are a different flavor, okay? Those are, you have the patron, the customer, the high roller, big spender who comes in, he's friends with management, ownership, whatever. And he basically thinks that he has, and again, I gender this, right? Because it is mostly men. It's mostly a certain type and age of men who do this. But you would see this all the time in Fort Lauderdale. Like you would see this all the time. Fort Lauderdale, Miami, South Florida. Like you see this all the time where it's like, you got these bars, restaurants, whatever, some chain, some independent, and people who are friends with like management, ownership, whatever, they come in and they basically feel like they have a license to like creep on all the women who work there and like grab them, grope them, feel them up, get sexual with them, like, right? Like have explicit conversations with them, pry into their personal lives, asking for naked pictures, like all this shit, right? Like that. Okay, right? The bar industry people are going to be like, well, that's just part of our culture, That's just part of our culture. Well, okay. You can say it's part of your culture, but you're on notice. You're on notice, and you're going to get popped for it. Okay, like literally, we've had a number of cases where there is a waitress, hostess, young woman who works at a bar, restaurant sort of setting, and a frequent like high roller, big spender patron who comes in, has the hots for her and has taken an interest in her and is like touchy-feely and handsy, and she goes to management and says, this makes me really uncomfortable, and they basically tell her like, tough shit. He's friends with the owners, right? He's a frequent client. He spends a lot of money here, and he's friends with the owners. So you just kind of have to suck it up. Well, that's not appropriate. That's not appropriate. It's 2025. That shouldn't be a condition of anybody's job. And that's one of the things that it ultimately goes back to, right? Like, everybody's got to make a living. Everybody's got to have a livelihood. Everybody's got to have a job. Everybody's got to pay the bills, okay? It is morally reprehensible to subject people to that sort of treatment and those sort of conditions, to sort of make that a condition of their job, right? That's unethical. That's immoral. That's wrong. It's egregious. It shouldn't happen, but it does happen. And when it does happen, okay, the key thing to remember is that whether it's retail, whether it's hospitality, whether it's stalker, whether it's the creeper, the perv, the handsy guy, whatever it is, the company is liable as soon as the company knows, okay? Or as soon as the company reasonably should know, but preferably as soon as the company knows, right? Because if it's like, should the company reasonably know? Should they have figured it out? Should they have been aware? Like, was there evidence, right? Like that. Now you're getting into a dispute over like, did the company know? Should they have known? What's reasonable, right? Is it reasonable to expect them to know based on these facts and circumstances? That's a different arena than the very sort of straight shot, like they knew, right? So as soon as the company knows, they're on notice. And now you are protected in the event that it continues to happen, because if it continues to happen, you have claims against the company for straight negligence. And obviously you would have claims against, you would have claims against the individual perp in those situations. But, sometimes the individual perp is worth pursuing. Sometimes they're not worth pursuing. In my experience, the most advantageous way to go about those cases is just straight shot pursue the company for their negligence in not stepping in and taking steps to protect you from situations, dangers, risks that they're aware of. Okay? Hope this helps. Happy Wednesday. Peace.